City of Stevens Point Finance Committee meeting, recorded Monday, May 13, 2019.
We'll call the Finance Committee to order Monday, May 15th at 8:19. Roll has been taken with Jeremy excused. We'll go to the first item on the agenda, which is the designation of the official newspaper.
Yes, so this is an annual action. We do solicit bids and take the lowest bid. This year we got one bid from the Portage County Gazette. They're our current newspaper of record, and there was no increase in price, so we would recommend approving them for another year.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second by Johnson.
Is this sort of like asphalt bids? There's only one vendor who's going to give you a bid, so.
You know, we have gotten bids from the Journal in the past. It's been a few years.
I remember.
Yep, yep. But we were glad that this year there wasn't an increase in the price.
Right, no, I agree.
Corey, I have a question.
Question?
Yeah.
Do all these need to be in print, or could they also be online?
That's something that, in order to be our official newspaper of record, they do need to have a paid circulation. There are specific requirements for that. So in other words, you can't be an online-only news publication and be our official newspaper of record. And as current law is stated right now, yeah, it has to actually offer a printed
Okay.
edition. Yep.
Okay, comments, questions? Seeing none, okay, the motion is for, to approve the Portage County Gazette as the official newspaper for Stevens Point. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion's carried. Item 2, permission for the Community Development Department to apply for the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation investment grant. There was information in your packet. Michael, is he still here? Yeah, he's here.
Yes.
Director Ostrowski, some comments?
Yeah, this grant is typically used for redevelopment-related purposes. It does have a match component of 3-to-1, but the private investment can be our match component. We recently applied for one for the Lullaby project. Hopefully, we should be hearing from WDC soon on that project. But we're able to apply for one grant per fiscal year. Their fiscal year ends in June 30th, so we would be able to reapply for another one here July 1st. This one I'd be looking to apply for the Wanta project on the former Belkey site.
Thank you. Any questions for Michael?
No.
Director, anybody else out there would like to talk to the director? Any questions, any motions?
Thank you, Chair. So I assume that, well, I guess in both cases, that the projects are well matched to the criteria for the grants.
Correct.
So I guess I'll move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Alderperson Johnson. Comments, questions from the audience? Seeing none, we'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Item 3, development agreement with Delta Dental of Wisconsin, Inc., related to the project TIF District 9 at 2000 Business Park Drive. There was a whole bunch of information in your
Yeah.
stuff there, so let's open it up or make motions or whatever you'd like to do. Michael, would you like to
Sure, I'll just
Move
give a
forward.
little
brief?
just a little brief background then. This is with Delta Dental looking at creating a new corporate headquarters in the Portage County Business Park. This is the site along the interstate, which is currently owned by Ascension. So with the development agreement, the developer would be purchasing that property. from the existing property owner looking to construct about a 100,000 square foot facility on that site, about $25 million in value. And then they plan to complete that within about 24 months, possibly starting as early as spring of next year. The city's contribution to this would be a pay-go incentive of 50% of the increment back for the remaining years left in TID number 9.
Okay, thank you.
Chair?
Alderperson Johnson?
I'll make a motion to approve, and then I'll have comments after we get it on the floor.
Second.
Second.
Okay. I think just providing some context, because we've been criticized of keeping things quiet, and people always launch things on people kind of all at once. This has been something that we've been talking about, obviously in closed session, as we're allowed to do under Chapter 19 for competitive reasons and negotiating reasons. And I would say that based on those conversations in closed session, community development did exactly as they were asked to by council, and so this shouldn't be a surprise. It should be a thank you for following through with the request from what council felt was appropriate for this deal.
Okay, thank you. Any,
Comment? Delta Dental is a good corporate citizen. It makes, I mean, and they have offices in every state. They make tens of billions of dollars as a non-for-profit firm. It's a very successful firm. It has grown and grown. One of the issues that I have is when we normally do this, it's for a business that needs that little more help. They need something to make it a little more, that makes it worth their while. Something that it's also something that the city needs. An apartment complex, a hotel downtown. And I can't help but think, but Century Insurance put up this huge office building and didn't ask for a dime of taxpayer money. And they probably could have. They are the biggest taxpayer that we have. But that goes about being a great corporate citizen. And now with this, it'll be, I mean, the life of this TIF is another 17 years. Delta Dental of Wisconsin has grown and grown and grown. It's a very successful firm. It's the #1 firm in the state. And one of the problems that I have is asking for taxpayer money for a firm that really doesn't need that. And a lot of the other firms do. And that's one of the, and that's just the main issue. That's the main issue that I have.
thank you. Corey, what do you think about this deal?
Well, I think when we sat down with Delta Dental and talked about it, we tried to come up with something that was fair to both parties as far as fair to the city, fair to Delta. Certainly, we've had developments happen in TIF districts where there hasn't been any TIF ask, and that's great. We've also had some where the TIF ask has been more significant even than this. As far as the number of years of increment, just kind of counting the years, especially if they break ground next year, and then by the time it's assessed, and by the time we're really seeing that tax revenue, I calculated 13 years of increment. So, and basically how it would work with the pay-as-you-go is they would get half of their increment back. So half would be kept by the city, and then half would go back to Delta Dental. The other thing that I would note for a development like this is sometimes, with, let's say, an apartment complex, it's easy to really calculate out, okay, how much are you charging in rents and how much are you really making on this project? It's a little bit more difficult with a corporate office building, and this is a question that I've asked of some other professionals in the field to say, how do you really evaluate the gap on something like that? Because, you're not just valuing the real estate investment, you're really, in order to do an analysis on that, you'd almost have to value the entire business. And it's very tough to do, to say, okay, here's specifically the gap for this project, because it's not the same as with an apartment building where you can say, okay, you know, you build this and it's going to generate this amount of revenue.
Okay, thank you.
The only other thing that I would add too is I think that the city does like the pay-as-you-go structure, especially in comparison to using our borrowing capacity, both because it's much less risk for the city, and then also keeps it off of our balance sheet and frees up our debt capacity to do other things, especially capital projects.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Jennings, you had your hand up earlier? Well, I saw you
Alder
first.
Nabel.
Tori Jennings, Alder District 1. I think I share Alder Morrow's hesitancy with this. In closed session, we've talked about Delta Dental in different places in terms of using TIF for a development that would happen anyway is not the way we should be using TIF. So I'm not convinced that this is meeting the but-for test in this location. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Nabel.
Thank you, Finance Committee. I was really surprised to see that there was a asking of pay-as-you-go for the development incentive for this. We never talked about that prior. We only talked about locations in closed sessions, so this seems to me something that I wouldn't be very comfortable with making a decision on, saying yay to something on this at this point. I also realize that you may not have a dollar amount compared to when they're doing an apartment complex, but we have no dollar amount here, even an idea of what we'd be paying back. I don't find that being transparent at all for our city to be able to go forward on something like this without more information. And again, I don't think this fits the criteria. And as you said, Century didn't ask for it, and I'm really shocked to see this today. So I would like us to take another look at this and get a better idea of what that payment would be if we're doing this, and if there's been other negotiations on this amount. 50% is quite a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe Corey
is-
can enlighten.
Yeah, assuming that that's a question, so if we take the $25 million and if we assume that that would be the assessed value, and of course it's hard, we can estimate that, but we can't tell you, we can't predict the future, obviously, and we can't tell you exactly what the building is gonna assess out for. But if we just assume that it's the full $25 million that they'd invest, that would be about $550,000 in increment per year at the current tax rate. Of that, basically $275,000 would be retained by the city, $275,000 would go to Delta Dental over the 13 years where they would receive the increment back. So total over 13 years from 2022 to 2034, you'd have, by this estimate, $3,575,000 going back to Delta Dental, and you'd have $3,575,000 retained by the city. Now, I do want to stress, of course, we don't know exactly what that building will assess out for at the end. So rather than 25 million, it could only assess for 20 million. But I think you get the idea as far as in general numbers, a general estimate of where you would be, which would be basically roughly 2.5 to 3 million as far as revenue for the city, and then 2.5 to 3 million as far as what we'd be giving back. I would also note that in comparison to some of our other development agreements, this actually is probably one of the more favorable development agreements that we've had, certainly if you want to compare it to either Skyward or AIG. We've had development agreements where we've more or less used up the full amount of the increment over up to 20 years. In this case, with the TIF life being a little bit shorter now that the TIF has been open for a while, you don't quite have as much to work with anyway, and then especially just doing half of the increment, really that's the equivalent of about 6.5 years worth of increment would be another way to look at it, or a 6.5 year payback, which in comparison to the other development agreements that we've done over time, actually is not at all unreasonable. Actually, it'd be more favorable compared to some of the other ones.
Okay, thank you. Did that answer your question, Alderperson? Okay. There's more understanding.
Oh, go
Councilmember
ahead,
Johnson.
if you were gonna say something,
Well,
Mr.
I was
Chair.
going to, I'm just so in favor of this project, that's all.
Oh, and I was, if I could just, one last thing, I appreciate that, thank you, Mr. Chair. We did discuss the general framework for this. Of course, we talked about a bunch of different things, and I agree. We had talked about, in closed session, a number of other locations, which would have been away from the interstate, but there was a recognition that, Skyward, yeah, see, it got in my brain, and now, your neighbors, your new neighbors, yeah. Delta Dental may not see that as advantageous to their business model. I like the pay-as-you-go. We did set the general parameters for staff. They didn't go loosey-goosey with this and sort of do whatever they wanted to do. This, we had given the general framework and expectations. So I wasn't surprised at all to see this. I like the pay-as-you-go because it does keep us, our debt capacity still open. We're getting some money out of it. And we're keeping Delta Dental in Stevens Point.
Thank you. Any other comments? Do you guys wish to talk? Okay. Any questions for the dental people? No? Okay, let's close it out here, I guess. Is somebody got a motion or something?
I made the
You
motion.
have a motion, you do.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Well, should we call for the question? Let's do that.
Sure.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion is carried. It'll be before the council next Monday. Okay, next item on the list here is the approval of the claims. And I'm sure you all looked at it
Yes.
closely.
May I?
Go ahead.
So just, I mean, you can go through the long list, and many of these things are routine. And one of the things that we do, I sit on the Commission on Aging, and of course, I chair the Healthcare Center Committee for the county. And what we do, instead of going through the long list, which can be rather extensive, and most of it is routine, I wonder if we might do something similar to what we do in those two, is ask for sort of those extraordinary expenses. And then maybe that's something the comptroller treasurer could say, you know, in addition to the routine expenses, which we tacitly approve by way of budget, is come back in and say, here's the vouchers that were paid. There were 5 extraordinary situations, and I'll, you know, they are this, and this, and this. That might be another way to create an opportunity for discussion rather than page after page. Not
So
to say
what
that we shouldn't go through page after page, but it can help give everybody else a little idea.
Okay, so so just so I understand, so basically you're saying you'd still like the full list, but maybe some, I guess, highlighting or kind of bringing out, okay, these are the unique,
Yes.
or the big items that we need to focus
Yeah.
on.
For me, I wouldn't frankly need to see the list because, again, in my perspective of public policy and public finance is we approve all of these by way of the budget, and then the authority is granted to the administrative agencies to execute that budget, and you are then authorized to make those payments and do your due diligence to make sure that happens. I mean, if the rest of the committee and the council wants to continue to see the long list, again, my preference would be for you to articulate to us, these are the extraordinary expenses and the things that you should be aware of.
Okay. And as far as, so extraordinary expenses, just so I have an idea, so I guess you would say things that are not very routine,
Right.
obviously,
Yeah.
and probably somewhat dollar amount would be a major factor
Right,
as
right.
well, as far as
Yeah.
like large payments for capital projects and-
Absolutely.
and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I think it's just a recommendation,
Sure.
so.
See, and I look at it the other way. I want to know what's going on. I want to know why it costs $900 for a fire truck that ran into somebody or whatever, you know. You don't ever see that, you know.
I understand that, but
Or-
again, I think from my daytime job, because I am the purchasing agent and I authorize the payment of vouchers for my department, my board just needs to know that they're paid. My boss, I work with my boss, who's the administrator, and runs the operation. We trust that through audits, which occur on a regular basis, and actually, sometimes even on a spot basis. Oh, we're here to do an audit. There's a lot of mechanisms to keep us all, keep everybody honest. But if the rest of the folks want to see that long list, that's great, but I think to help emphasize and bring out things, I think it's important to just say, here's some of the things that are not routine, sort of, yep, we paid the credit card bill, yep, we paid Frank's Hardware for screws and nuts and bolts, and so.
Okay. Any more comments or questions? I had one, and that was for Michael. Is Michael still here?
Michael's still here.
He's still here.
I didn't get a chance to call you today because you were busy and I was busy. This AECom Technical Services Remedial Action on Normington sites. How long are we going to pay these people? This has been going on for 100 years,
Around that long?
long time. No, what's going on?
So the white trailer got removed today, so perfect timing.
Oh, nice.
So they just submitted for case closure on the last part of the mall project, environmental. So they just moved the white remediation trailer that was in the corner of the Midstate parking lot over to the streets garage. So this is starting to come to an end.
Winding down. Do we have any guesstimation of,
We've submitted for case closure, so there'll probably be some small little bills coming in, but nothing too significant.
okay, what about the Normington site though?
That is the Normington
Well, that's
site.
what they're calling the
That's what
Normington
they,
site?
so there was a Normington Dry Cleaners within the IGA store. That was
Because I always think about the one on the south side.
The one on the south side, we don't have cost.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
that was paid for by the owner.
Thank you, thank you. Is there a motion to pay the claims?
Motion to approve.
I second.
Got that? Comments, questions from the audience? We'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion to pay the claims, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nope.
Hearing, what?
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Hearing none,
Yes.
the motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, item number 5 is, we need to adjourn in a closed session approximately, 8:40. Pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 91.5, deliberating, negotiating the purchase of public properties, investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session on the following. A, negotiating the terms of development agreement relating to possible project in TIF District 6. B, negotiating terms of development agreement relating to possible project in TIF District 5. Negotiating terms of another agreement in the TIF District 5. So do I have a motion to go into closed session?
Motion to go into closed session.
Second.
Okay. Please call the roll.
Phillips,
Aye.
Morrow,
Aye.
Shore,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Videos of these meetings are available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.